This is an audio test for Community Access Television Services, coming to you live from the Monroe County Courthouse, downtown Bloomington, Indiana.
of the Community Justice Response Committee. Unfortunately, Commissioner Githens has something of a stomach bug and she'll be unable to join us. So that means you're all stuck with me as your coach or as your chair for tonight. So we'll go ahead and I'll call this meeting to order. And Ms. Mosier, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Counselor Iverson.
Here.
Counselor Crossley.
Here.
Counselor Wiltz.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Judge Fawcett.
Here.
Judge Crothy.
Here.
From the prosecutor's office, April Wilson.
Here.
From the public defender's office, Karen Runbeck.
Here.
And Sheriff Marte. Yes, is here. I will note for the record again that Commissioner Githens is not present.
Thank you, Ms. Mosier. Next, we'd like to read out our statement of guiding principles. And I've asked my colleague, Council Member Crossley, to read those.
Recognizing our commitment to public safety, we will work collaboratively and transparently to prioritize treatment over incarceration when appropriate, build a justice facility that meets constitutional standards and treats inmates with dignity, address inequities in race, economic status, disability, national origin, sexual orientation, and gender. And lastly, reduce the number of people entering the criminal justice system and reduce recidivism for those who were in the system.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Councilmember Crossley. The next item on today's agenda is public comment. If you have not yet signed up, the sign up is directly behind Sheriff Marte. Ms. Mosier is holding up the sign-in sheet, so you're more than welcome to sign that. We will also recognize those on Zoom. So simply raise your hand on Zoom and we will find all that out. All right, let's go ahead and start with Kay Weinberg. Ms. Mr. Weinberg, the chair next to Sheriff Marte is open and we believe that the microphone is working. So please come on up and the floor is yours for 3 minutes. TSD has generously put up a timer. So you know when to start.
Great, thanks. Okay, great. So I have a open letter that I'd like to just pass around as part of this, if I could. Thanks. Yeah, and I'll just read it. It's the County Commissioner's Office has consistently taken an illegal and anti-transparent approach to their jail expansion proposal. A formal complaint about the closed door nature of the RFQ decision is now filed with the Indiana Public Access Counselor. In the meantime, we support Sheriff Marte in demanding accountability for their recent actions during onboarding the DLZ firm outlined below. And then we just excerpt Marte's recent letter that he put out, which you can read. And then I'm going to say, we believe that citizens deserve leadership that takes their voices into account. We will not let Monroe County ignore underrepresented voices and tie up hundreds of millions of taxpayer money in a rushed project, or even considering repairing the existing facility as recommended in their own consultant report. We reject a shady government approach of backroom deals. We believe in making space for a different conversation, where we can plan together as a community about what care could be funded with the hundreds of millions of surplus taxpayer dollars in the county accounts. Thank you. Did everyone get a copy of that letter?
Yes, it made us around.
Great.
Thank you for your comments. Let's see, it looks like we have a hand raised on Zoom next, and it looks like it's the Democratic Women's Caucus. Is it Penny?
It's just Penny. I wanted to be promoted to panelist, so that's all.
Oh, excellent. All right. Well, TSD, could we please promote Commissioner Githens, and then Commissioner Githens, if you could rename yourself, that would be wonderful as well. Next, we have, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Haggerty. Please come forward. Next to Sheriff Marte, we have an open seat and a working microphone for you.
Oh, thank you. How much time do I have?
You have 3 minutes and there's a timer right behind my head that will count down for you. And there's also one right next to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, we'll make sure Zoom hears. I'm here because I'm not sure who everybody in this group is, but I know that's the group that is deciding on what the new jail is going to be and where to put it. And it seems to me that the obvious place is the old hospital. And it seems to be remarkable, and I've been told that there's no representative from the city on this board, and that that's remarkable too, because 80% of the people in the Bloomington jail are Bloomington citizens. The fact that that's not even been thought of or discussed as the obvious site is a remarkable thing. Another remarkable thing is no one has brought up the number of deaths in custody during the last administration. It's like, does anyone know that we've had multiple deaths in custody in our jail? And if you don't know, isn't that remarkable? Imagine if one of these kids that died in the jail had been an IU student rather than one of these cutters. We would have a major news event within a half an hour across the nation. But since these kids are poor kids, and apparently 4 suicides according to our legal system, but how would I know? How would you know? You're just learning about them. I think that's a remarkable thing. And the fact that they all came after our community recovery program was canceled, I think is a remarkable coincidence. So I was in charge of the recovery program on the board of directors for 15 years. And we worked in the jail successfully during that time. And we had a recovery program that would be the model for any recovery program in the country, and especially for Bloomington, because it evolved in Bloomington and involved concerned people that were part of our community, that made a bridge to the people in the jail, that caused it to be a therapeutic place at that time. All these suicides have occurred since that program was canceled. So I'm asking you guys to consider that. Look it up, find out about these deaths in our jail. One was a Black boy who had just turned 18, who was denied his heart medication and died of a heart attack in our recovery block. The fact that this isn't national news makes me wonder why I'm living in Bloomington. Anyway, it's nice to see y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty, for your comments. Next, we have Kaisa Goodman. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Kaisa Goodman, Public Engagement Director for the City of Bloomington. During public comment 2 weeks ago, I shared that several city staff had just met with Council Attorney Jeff Cockle about potential jail locations, specifically the Thompson property just south of Catalin. It took quite a few emails, but I'm glad to say we have scheduled a tour for later this week. In attendance will be myself, City Corporation Counsel Beth Kate, City Planning Director Scott Robinson, County Attorney Jeff Cockrell, Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Gibbons, who serves as the jail commander, County Councilor Kate Wiltz, and potentially another county council member as well. I'm sharing this once again in a public meeting because I want to be transparent about progress and collaboration that is happening between our city and county governments. I'm also going to be transparent about the city's frustration with the very slow pace of any progress. It shouldn't take weeks or months to schedule a meeting, any meeting, but particularly one associated with such a critical and time-sensitive issue. This relates to our concerns about how ineffective and inefficient it is for the city's only participation in this committee to come from biweekly public comment rather than regular dialogue. It also pushes the conversations that do happen into non-public meetings. As an observer of the CJRC, it feels like a majority of each meeting is spent discussing the structure and operations of the committee itself rather than the issue at hand, justice reform and how to help people. While some logistical discussion at a committee meeting is to be expected, I think the high ratio of process to content that we've seen over a sustained period of time speaks to deep-seated concerns of many committee members and community members. At the risk of contributing to that problem with these remarks, I ask the CJRC members and particularly the commissioners who determine the makeup and structure of the committee to reassess how this group and our community as a whole can accelerate substantive progress on the issues of justice reform and public health investments. Finally, I'll reiterate what I've said in the last half dozen CJRC meetings. Our community needs to do two major things. One, determine the location and scale of a potential new jail. And two, address the crisis of mental health and substance use disorder, which is damaging people and our community every day. A heartbreaking statistic. In 2022, 64 people in our community died from accidental drug overdoses, which is a 150% increase from 2019. This is a crisis. With so many partners in our community who want to be a part of the solution, I hope that we can all rise to the occasion and demonstrate serious leadership on this issue. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman, for your comments. Next,
Natalia Galvin has her hand raised on Zoom.
thank you, Ms. Mosher. Ms. Galvin, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Natalia Galvin, and I'm a Monroe County resident. 2 weeks ago, I presented a statement on behalf of an organization I'm a member of in person. Today, I speak on behalf of myself. At the last meeting, I spoke strongly about condemning the disrespectful treatment of Councilwoman Crosley, Sheriff Marte, and Prosecutor Wilson in these meetings. Everyone deserves respect and civility. 2 days later, I witnessed what I would characterize as one of the worst government meetings in recent memory, including city council meetings at the Wednesday County Commissioner work session. The behavior displayed by the Commissioner Administrative Assistant Purdy and Commissioner Githens towards Chief Deputy Parker was unacceptable and needs to continue to be called out. That is not okay behavior in these meetings. It's not okay behind closed doors, but it's not okay witnessing this week after week. The Chief Deputy and Sheriff's Department is calling for transparency and integrity. The public is calling for transparency and integrity. While city issues usually get most of the community's focus, the community is paying attention to this. We are here now. We are paying attention to the county now, and we will continue to pay attention and voice our concern. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Galvin, for your comments. Next, we have Seth Muchler here in the county courtroom. Welcome, and the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Seth Muchler. I am a resident of Monroe County. As most of you probably know, I usually come prepared with a prepared statement. I've sort of taken on a hobby as amateur speechwriter recently. It's been a busy couple of weeks, so I don't have one. So you get an off-the-cuff statement today. And as such, I sort of have a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. One piece is, I think, following the trend of some of my associates who have handed out things, and in my spare time, I've enjoyed doing a lot of literature distribution. So I have, this is just some supplemental reading, but I thought it's something that the committee might enjoy reading. So I can pass this around if you'd like to take one. The zine, for those who can't see it, is a pamphlet titled "What is Prison Abolition?" I also wanted to say that, I think there's been a lot of conversation about a new jail, whether there should be one, what that would look like if there is one, what a renovated current jail would be like. And I think there may be some ideological shifts on this committee and within the community as to what that would look like. But I want to echo, and I apologize, I don't recall precisely who was putting it forward at previous meetings, but looking beyond the conversation of whether or not there should be a new jail and what that should look like, which I think is an important conversation, I want to also ask that we continue to work towards things that can be done today outside of the jail, and thank you, in substance use treatment, in mental health treatment, working with some of the recommendations that were in the Eve Hill report. I read that report when I first started getting involved in this, and I think it's about time for me to read it again because there's a lot of prescient information in there that I think could really do a lot of good in our community. And I know there's a lot of organizations, just to name one, for example, New Leaf New Life, who's ready to do some great work and help people avoid jail entry and avoid recidivism as well. So I just want to encourage the committee to, to focus on those as well, because those are actions that we can take. And it seems to be something that there's a lot more common ground on it. The sense I get is that we can all agree that those are programs and activities. So it seems like something, speaking to a past comment about the pace, that seems like something we could move on pretty quickly. So I would hope to see some discussions of that, maybe some presentations from some local nonprofits and service providers to come in and talk about how we can start making some progress towards that. I know there was just some discussion back in, I think, January of Intercept Zero organizations coming in and presenting, and that seems to have fallen off. So I'm personally very excited to see that happening and put back onto the agenda for future meetings. So thank you all for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you for the comments and pamphlet. Last, doesn't look like we have anybody on cats or online, is Council Member Isabel Piedmont Smith. Council Member, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and greetings to my county colleagues. I know we are all very concerned about community justice and the mental health and addiction crisis that we're facing in our community. So I speak to you as I recognize that you're all dedicated to finding solutions. I want to echo some of the comments made by Seth and by Kaisa in regard to the priority of mental health care and substance use disorder care. And just refer back to the guiding principles of this committee, where number 1 is prioritize treatment over incarceration when appropriate. I don't know what when appropriate means, but treatment over incarceration. I feel like there's been very little, if any, action on treatment. And it's definitely very closely related to people ending up in the criminal justice system. So I would urge you to work hard on the treatment aspect. Also in your guiding principles, the very first sentence says we will work collaboratively and transparently. And I feel like that has not occurred. As a city council member, I continue to be dismayed that nobody from the city is being officially consulted in any kind of public meeting. And the way that DLZ was selected and some of the other, the statement of principles or the vision that the commissioners presented a few weeks ago, there was no transparent process behind those things that I can discern. And so that is also disturbing to me. So I urge the commissioners to make good on the promises of your guiding principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Seeing no other hands raised and no other members signed up, last call. Anybody else want to make a public comment at today's CJRC meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a presentation by DLZ. So would representative or representatives please come forward? And we've got 2 seats here next to Sheriff Marte. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you, and share with us what you have brought today.
So we shared a thumb drive with upstairs beginning of the meeting.
We'll give TSD a moment here.
All right, thank you. My name is Scott Carnegie, project manager with DLZ. I'm a lifelong Bloomington, Monroe County resident, born and raised here, been through the MCCSC School Corporation, and continue to raise my family here. Have been with DLZ for 16 years now. And this is Eric Ratz. He and I started working together in 1994. So we can just about finish each other's sentences. We have a lot of history together. If you could maybe just advance the slide a little bit forward. Yeah, there you go. So a little bit about DLZ. We are a full service architectural engineering firm. We are headquartered. We work out of our Indianapolis office, and each office has its own little niche that they specialize in. And we happen to specialize in what we refer to as justice architecture. Justice architecture is really all encompassing. It's not, just jails and sheriff's offices, but it's also courts, community corrections, probation, work release, so on and so forth. It's all encompassing justice related. We are, according to the Engineering News Record, which is a leading publication in our industry, ranks DLZ as the #1 correctional design firm. That's predominantly based on the volume of work and the number of repeat clients that we have. And we're very proud of that and work hard to maintain that. We have 830 employees. And as I mentioned before, we are a full service architectural engineering firm. And we've completed over 150 justice related projects. And you can see the map on the monitors. You can see the dark gray colors are where we have completed justice related projects. There you go. So we wanted to share just some project examples and talk a little bit about them. And we selected these projects for a reason. I've been attending these meetings, I think, for about a year and a half now. I usually sit right there on the front corner there. So I've been listening to all the comments that have been, said during these community justice response committee meetings. So we picked these projects because there's something specific that we want to talk about that we think is relevant to the conversations that we've heard over the last year and a half. A couple of these projects in particular, you will recognize, or some of you will recognize, in the top left-hand corner, that's the Franklin County Corrections Center in Columbus, Ohio. Councilmember Iverson presented that project last week or 2 weeks ago. And then the photograph in the bottom right, that's the Vigo County project that some of you have toured. It's been open, for about a year now? About a year. The photograph in the top right, that's the Stark County Justice Center. And there's something unique about that I want to talk about. And then the bottom left is the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office and Jail in Madison, Indiana. So the Franklin County Corrections Center, I know that there were 3 people from Monroe County that have toured that facility. Councilmember Iverson, Sam Crow, David Gardner. It's been several months ago. But that project is really, we're proud of it because it includes a holistic approach to design. It really entails addressing the medical, mental health, behavior management. And when you all were talking, I think it was 2 meetings ago, about your trip to Arizona and some of the things you saw and you liked there. If you would have looked back there, you would have seen me smiling, nodding my head, because there's a lot of things about this particular project that you all were citing that you saw in Arizona that I was like, yeah, we did that here in Franklin County. We realized that this project is not what we're suggesting for Monroe County. First and foremost, the majority of our projects are 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 bed jail. A 500 bed facility here in the Midwest is big. This is certainly bigger than that, but there are certain components of this facility that we think are applicable to Monroe County that are scalable, that we can implement certain components. And a lot of that, as I mentioned before, based on conversations that I've heard this committee talk about for the last year or so. This is also a LEED Silver certified project. And I know Councilmember Iverson spoke about that just a moment ago. And Mike Jackson with the NIC, the National Institute of Corrections, which I would suggest at some point that we reach out to him as a group. They're a wonderful resource for jail planning. That they call this the Center for Innovation, because this is one of the first projects in the Midwest that really takes a holistic approach to design and more specifically treating the medical mental health aspect of the inmate population.
So I want to dig a little bit deep. County, or as we call it, the JAG.
Could you speak into the microphone for Zoom, please?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So we call it the JAG because James A. Kearns was a former sheriff that passed away about a dozen years ago. And one of the things about this facility is we actually started on an assessment of their two facilities back in 2009, 2010. They had a downtown facility, then they had a facility, Jackson Pike, on the south side. And one of the things that they were really struggling with was incarcerating huge amounts of people. And a recidivism rate was very high. And they weren't making any changes. There were not rehabilitation efforts or much with the inmates. And looking at the whole operations of how can we make a change. So fast forward about 5 years, they selected a site. And then they selected DLZ through a very extensive interview process. And we were selected with firms from all over the country competing for the same project. One of the things that they immediately did was, once DLZ was on board, was we started touring facilities throughout the Midwest, but also down in Texas and even out in California, because they were wanting to make a difference. And we heard that all the time from the commissioners. Are you making a difference? Are you making a difference in the design? They really wanted to treat from the moment someone stepped out of the arresting officer's vehicle, stepped in the vehicle sally port, walking into the pre-booking area, was they were wanting to set a tone for how inmates were going to be respected and also how they expected for the inmates to act in the facility. And as you walk through the facility, you see some things that are very responsive to making sure that inmates can be rehabilitated as much as they want to be, but they're giving many opportunities to do that. And as Scott alluded to, there is a significant emphasis on what I call the societal issues, whether it's behavioral management, mental health, addictions, or medical issues, is that we have step down units of various different types, sizes throughout the whole one wing of the facility, because not every inmate is the same. And they understand that. And what they did was they made an emphasis on that from the point they walked into the facility, every step they take throughout the facility, and into the various different types of housing that they have. It is a direct supervision facility. They were not in a direct supervision facility, but they worked very closely with Mike Jackson of the National Institute of Corrections, as Scott talked about, and they really wanted to engage in that type of facility. So, not to bring humor in this, but Columbus, Ohio, they did all their training up in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan area, which was a funny thing that they all joked about, but it was a facility that they were able to go and train in with all their folks that would be working in the new facility, set them up for a couple of days so they could see what it's like. The other aspects with it that I want to mention is, for an example, like in the bottom left-hand corner, is, you know, we talk all the time about how the building is operated, but it's also how it's maintained. And this is a building that is, as you can see in the bottom left, wide chases, all the piping, all the conduit is all color coded. And it's for that, for a very particular reason, Public Facilities Management, who manages the maintenance of the facility, wanted to make sure that this is a building that works for the sheriff's office, but also works for the maintenance staff so that they can maintain the facility from a point of view. Highly encouraged, just as Mike Jackson says, anyone planning a new facility in the entire United States, I encourage everyone to walk through the JAC and just to see all the things that Columbus, Ohio was able to accomplish. But also, as Scott alluded to, you take bits and pieces, and what works for Monroe County can work for you the same way.
Just a few things to point out from those photographs. There was a big emphasis on natural light, daylight into those spaces. So I think similar to one of the projects that the commissioners pointed out from Arizona, where the rec areas and, you know, the large windows at the end of the housing unit, we actually did daylight studies to where we actually placed the building, you know, on a virtual site and map the sun, see how far back into the facility the daylight was going to reach. It's covered up there by the text there, but you can see murals we have placed on walls directly across from holding cells or sub day rooms. Just the introduction of color into the space can make a huge difference. So those are just some of the things. We've got another image coming up here that we'll talk about in just a moment. But lastly, I want to point out, it's what Columbus, Ohio, Franklin County, what they refer to as the Rapid Resource Center and the sequential intercept model, catching them on the back end. So right near the inmate release, which is just to the very left of that top left photograph, where inmates, when they've been released, and there's an inmate pickup area there right at the front of the building where all the public comes into the facility. There's an area there where there's social service organizations there. They have offices there. They have hoteling space. They have, pamphlets and brochures. They can charge their phones. They have, donated clothing and that kind of thing where they can send them out with support. So that's also then a very encouraging aspect that they designed into the facility. Next slide. So this is Jefferson County Jail in Madison, Indiana. This is currently in construction. It's scheduled to be complete in July of 2023. So here in just about 3 or 4 months. It's a 300 rated bed facility. There's specialized housing in this project. And one thing I want to point out, and it's literally, you see the state of Indiana flag right there. So this is obviously a rendering, but right behind that flag there in that corner, there's a special area that's dedicated to the medical mental health. It's right adjacent to the intake booking as well as the medical. So there's that interaction there between those two program spaces. They have their own indoor outdoor recreation space. They have a sub day room where they can kind of subdivide the mental health aspect. We also planned this facility for a court, separate court facility, just immediately off to the right. The other thing I want to point out is on the back side of this building where the faculty and staff parking is, there's a dedicated entrance for the staff, but it's also a dedicated training room that's also open to the public for other agencies. And it was specifically designed to be self-supportive. So in other words, we can shut doors, lock doors, but they have everything that they need to facilitate after hours training. There's restrooms there, there's kitchenette there, there's everything they need within that one little area. So that, again, was pretty unique. Anything else you want to add regarding this project?
No, nothing you've addressed it.
Okay. Next. So this is Stark County Justice Center. This one I'm pretty proud of. This was kind of my baby. One thing I wanted to point out, you can see in the top left-hand corner right there, that was an existing facility. It was a millwork type warehouse facility. The county purchased this property, but everything that you see beyond that front little corner there, that was all new addition. You can see that there's a new 911 dispatch center. And then beyond the radio tower, you see that's the housing area. One thing that's very unique about this, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a sign there. It says, "Welcome to the farm." Well, the farm is an acronym for fostering a recovery mentality. If you see in the aerial photograph there in the top right, you can see they actually have garden spaces. They have greenhouse. Last time I was up there, they had aquaponics. So they were really fostering a recovery mentality by permitting inmates to go outside, participate in gardening activities. They actually set up a curbside, little farmer's market where people can stop and buy produce and that kind of thing. They use the produce within the kitchen themselves. So it was very unique. We also included in the bottom left-hand photograph, you can see that there's a court facility that we designed into this project as well. Sheriff Bill Doolin, he was the sheriff when this project was turned over, and he really put a lot of emphasis on the program. So there's a lot of programming spaces built into this facility as well.
I would say that also that this facility probably has had as much articles written about it, especially from the Indiana Sheriff's Association about the therapeutic community, about making a difference. They have shared, the folks at Stark County have shared their successes with many other counties at the different ISA events. And it's something a lot of people have went to. Another thing that's pretty interesting about this is that doesn't necessarily show in these photographs, but Scott alluded to the programming. They actually have some area in the building that they use for some woodworking where they make some products. They also probably may be the best county facility in the state of Indiana, how they do their commissary. Sheriff, I'd recommend that you reach out to them because how they do their commissary, it helps them pay for a lot of things for these programs within the facility.
And if you go to their website, you'll see they're pretty proud of the woodworking items that the inmates have made, and they sell them locally. So it's pretty unique. Next slide.
So Vigo County Security Center over in Terre Haute, they were facing their prior facility was built in 1980, was expanded in the year 2000, designed by another firm, both projects, and they were facing multiple federal lawsuits, something for conditions of confinement to overcrowding, as well as many other things. And so back in 2016, DLZ was 2015, actually, we were selected to do a feasibility study through a very extensive process. We developed the feasibility study, and then through a very similar process, we were selected to design the new facility. Worked rather extensively on to identify a site, looked at many different options. I believe the number is 13 sites at one time we had done just some different sketches on. As many of you are aware, if you've done your research, they had a very active Citizens for Better Government within the community. The commissioners and council had multiple meetings just like this. They did them in various locations, also various times of the day, days of the week, to get as much involvement as they could from that point of view. The commissioners finally decided upon a site. After a lot of due diligence, they decided to build on a former par 3 golf course that's right behind the Honey Creek Shopping Center. And they reached out to all the folks at the shopping center to make sure that there were no issues from that perspective. We designed the facility and went through the whole programming, the whole design phase, multiple meetings with a lot of people. Ultimately, we decided to build a 504 bed facility. Very similar to you, Dr. Kenneth Ray was involved in doing a facility assessment / building program to determine number of rated beds. From his study to our study, there was actually 1 bed difference between the two studies. One of the things about Vigo County is that in Indiana, you see a lot of the jails have similar components throughout the facilities. But one of the things that you see in Vigo County is that there has been a significant influence on natural light. We have huge amounts of natural light from the intake booking area, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner. And it is all trying to keep that normalized environment of whenever you bring an inmate into the point of arrest. At the point of the arrest, the sheriff and the staff, everyone knows at that point of arrest is a very tensious moment for the folks that are going into the facility. The bottom left, although all of the piping and things are not color coded, like Franklin County, it's still set up the same way with enormous widths and heights, clearances to make sure that you can maintain the facility throughout. Some of the other things that are very important about this is that we have a dedicated special housing area, both for males and females, that we also have rec space that's part of that. In the bottom right, you can start to see it, but you can see that this is a medical area that also is for the behavioral management, all the societal issues that I noted. But you can see a lot of natural light that's coming into the area with that. One of the things from the federal lawsuits, the commissioners were required to go on a monthly basis to the Bayou Courthouse downtown Indianapolis and stand in front of the judge and state what all the improvements were going to be in the facility. And with me being the architect, I was obviously attending those with them. One of the things that, or two of the things that were paramount that the judge said that we needed to include was how we did the visitation. You know, so often today, the visitation is with iPads, in essence, tablets with that, which we have that, but we also still have the non-contact visitation. Think about you talk between the glass, but then also the contact visitation where you sit in a room. And there are very specific reasons why you need all three of those. And we also brought into those opportunities in various points of the facility. Not everything was at the front door of the facility, but we also brought some opportunities back into the actual housing area, just in case we did not want to move the inmates so much throughout the facility. One of the other things I just wanted to note is that their judges were intimately involved in our whole pretrial services at the point of at the point of entrance into the facility, of where we have special conference rooms where different folks can meet with them before they bring them in that last door into the booking area. They can maybe be taken to another facility. So there's a point of, do we bring them on in or do we take them somewhere else? At the same time, we have offices / conference rooms for, I believe there's 5, for different folks that once they are in the facility, if they need additional discussions, they have those opportunities. And this is different than just the normal visitation. This is more within the system. But then the other thing is we have 4 video arraignment spaces, one of them being a courtroom where judge, prosecutor, defendant can all be in one space, even if they want to do arraignments or whatever at the initial point. But the arraignment / video courtrooms were very important in the overall design as well. So.
Next slide. So those of you that I'm sure that when we've been on tours before, you've probably heard me say, and I'll continue to say, the way that we have been designing jails for the last 20 to 30 years, it's not working. It's not sustainable. We realize that the recidivism rate is outrageous, just a revolving door. So we need to be doing something different. And we have been over the last several years, 5-6 years in particular, have been taking a more holistic approach to jail design, because we realize that we have to treat the whole person. From the time that the sheriff's office first makes their contact to the time that they leave, and then beyond, following up with them after they've been released. There's as we've said before, and we'll continue to say, and I know that I've heard you all say this over the last year and a half, the importance of addressing the mental health. It's not just this community, it's everywhere. But I will have to say, as a Monroe County taxpayer, even if I was not the architect, I would still be sitting right back there, and I would still be championing you all for the emphasis that you're putting on addressing the mental health aspect. So what we want to talk about a little bit now is how we actually address some of these elements in design.
So one thing I would like to add, back in 1987, when I did my first internship, the first thing I ever worked on was the Reception Diagnostic Center for the Indiana Department of Correction. And when did the big 5-story expansion to it. And at that point in time, our whole thing of how we approach things was much more about the control of the inmates. Okay, it was the control and custody of the inmates. Well, today we're looking much more towards the care and the custody of the inmates. We want to make sure that we are making a difference. So the approach, as Scott alluded to, is very different. From the controlling them to caring for them is a big difference in the philosophy of how we approach these facilities.
Just before you go to the next slide, Mr. Carnegie, would you read the sentence that's hidden by the closed captioning there? Or I can read it for you.
Yeah, I can't say it.
It says a different approach is necessary.
Yeah.
And we have also talked to TSD. I know some of you are having a hard time seeing these slides. And unfortunately, it's a glitch with the system. We'd have to leave the meeting and come back in to fix this. So as words or phrases continue to be hidden, gentlemen, if it's okay with you, I'll just pause and make sure that your words are acknowledged.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, next slide. So this is a photograph and Peter kind of stole my thunder a couple of weeks ago regarding the Franklin County Community Corrections Center. But this is just another photograph, and you can see how we've really addressed bringing in biophilic design meaning natures of, elements of nature. We've done that through natural light, through color, through the murals, through the introduction of color. So everything isn't grays and tans that you might expect to see in a lot of jails and correctional facilities. We have a floor plan coming up that we're going to talk about and kind of walk you around the space because it hits on a point that the commissioners made in their trip to Arizona. But again, you can see down there at the very end, that's a rec area, an outdoor rec where they can open up the side doors and get natural light and ventilation, natural light all the way through into their living space.
One thing I would like to add is when a lot of folks, they see these photographs or these renderings, they're like, how does that hold up in a correctional facility? These are all detention grade materials. It's just a different way to implement them into the design. And that's one of the things that makes a big difference.
And again, before we move on, the check marks on the right-hand side say biophilic design, then program spaces, then continuum of care.
And we'll talk about those here in just a moment. Okay. All right. So this is actually the same floor plan of that same housing unit that we were just looking at. And what I wanted to draw attention to is we are a huge proponent of bringing the services to the inmates as opposed to taking the inmates to the services. That's very staff intensive. And we like to have the services, what we call, on the day room housing area. So this, as Eric mentioned before, this is a direct supervision. And I think you had mentioned that you were accustomed to that or had seen that at Rikers previously. This is direct supervision, meaning that there is staff in the day room with the inmates. So you can see in the top right-hand corner, it's a program classroom area. So the inmates don't have to leave their housing area. And you can see a service provider can come in through the interlock there and come into the program classroom through a different door. There, just behind the steps, there's a custodial storage area because the inmate workers are responsible for cleaning their own housing area. The next green box just left of the stairs, that's what they call a timeout room. So if an inmate just needs to go somewhere and decompress, he can go in. There's actually a rocking chair, a correctional detention rocking chair in there. There's sound seals on the doors. They cannot lock themselves in. But that's a place that they can go just to get away, cool down. And then the center green box there along the top, that's a medical exam area. So again, any kind of medical needs that inmate may have, they can be treated right there on the housing unit. And then the box right behind the staff post, that's a professional visitation, correct?
Yep.
Area. And the other thing I wanted to point out, and the commissioners pointed this out when they toured in Arizona, they were talking about having hot water where they can, for commissary and that kind of thing. So there's washers and dryers right there because inmates are permitted to do some of their own laundry in their own housing area. There's also a recycling area that's built in. That was part of the LEED to get points for LEED accreditation. And then there's the hot water right there where they can, take their ramen noodles or oatmeal and that kind of thing that they purchase off a commissary. And it's all right there on the housing unit. And then the left, you'll see that's the indoor outdoor rec space. So each housing area, this is just one, but each housing area has all of these elements right here so that the services are brought to the inmates, not vice versa. And it's much more staff efficient. Franklin County.
Yes.
And again, just there are certain components of Franklin County that we think are applicable to Monroe County.
Yeah, quick question about
Sure.
that layout. You said things about Franklin County.
Sorry, Thank you. You said things about the Franklin County site are scalable. So my question is, with this kind of design, how many people are in that unit that we're seeing now? And then efficiency wise, how few people could be in a unit like that?
So let me address that. One of the things that you can do is maybe two housing units share one indoor-outdoor rec space instead of each one having their own. But it is directly, which is similar to what Jefferson County did. They liked the idea, but they were also saying, we have a 300-bed jail. Can we have something where we can share some spaces so not every single one of them has it? We can absolutely design these where some of these core spaces like this are adjacent in between two housing units, which helps reduce the scale of it.
The other thing I want to point out about Franklin County, when you look at it, if you don't know this, it could be deceiving. But all the beds in Franklin County are single bunk. So when you see a bed, for example, in the floor plan, they're not the traditional double bunk. Because that was, again, going back to that they really want to promote a normalized environment. So they wanted everybody down on ground level. And also just to reduce the occurrence of injury, somebody climbing in and out of a top bunk.
And I apologize, I might have missed it. So how many individuals can be in this particular block?
Each housing area will vary. They usually vary anywhere from around 32 inmates per housing area. There's some, and Peter saw some that were larger, like 40, 48.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason some of the variations of that is they have some that are orientation pods, they have some that are maximum, they have some that are medium, they have some that are inmate workers, and there's just a big variation of what those are. It's all part of their 9 levels of classification.
And the other thing that you will hear us say very frequently during design is the importance of building in flexibility. We want to build day rooms, housing areas that vary in size because of needing to separate prey from predator, male from female. So for example, if we have I'm just picking a number. Let's just say we have a 12-bed female housing area. Well, we have 14 inmates, female inmates. I don't want to take up a whole nother 12-bed female housing pod, house those 2 additional females if I have a area where there's that is smaller. So because that frees up more inmate beds that can be used for other inmates for classification. So that's something else that you will hear us say frequently during design.
So something that you may be leaning towards for something like Monroe County, typically we would have 24 beds or less in a housing. Typically for a facility like Monroe County, medium-sized facilities or larger ones actually for Indiana is we would typically look at about 24 beds or less in housing units. And that helps significantly with what Scott was alluding to with just being able to make sure that we have the right number of beds for flexibility. We don't want units that are too big with bed setting empty. And we don't want, and so that just seems to work very well in Indiana.
Are there other questions or should we move on? All right.
So one of the other big emphasis that we're putting on jail designs is the staff amenities. Recruiting staff, keeping staff, it's a big problem throughout the state, really kind of throughout the country. You train them, you want to keep them. So we designed elements into the facilities that are specific for the staff. You can see this happens to be where this is a staff dining area where they have the indoor or the outdoor. There's actually a small little kitchen in that area. And at this facility, they actually have offered free beverages. It just felt like that was a nice perk to have for the staff. Also a wellness center, where they can go in and lift weights, cardio, free weights, that type of thing. with, some nice locker rooms where they can actually plug in their cell phones and that type of thing in the lockers themselves securely. So those are just some of the amenities that we design into facilities, all for the purpose of staff retention and recruitment. So project approach. This is a typical project approach. So initially, there's a kickoff with all the stakeholders where we talk about the project goals, objectives, those types of things, kind of a high level, not too much unlike what you all have been doing over the last year or so, just kind of beginning to define some of those goals. Site review and master planning, and running concurrently with that is what we refer to as building programming. Building programming is, for example, meeting with the sheriff and jail administration and walking through, we have kind of a master programming spreadsheet that is usually kind of a good starting point, where we sit down, we have dialogue and, we say, how many inmate housing areas, what's the classification? We'll talk about, how many offices, conference rooms, detectives' offices, the whole gamut. And that's really kind of our kind of beginning recipe where we can kind of begin to formulate some of the shapes and sizes.
Keep talking to the microphone a
All
little
right,
more.
thank you.
Mhm.
And then there's 3 primary design phases. There's
Just
schematic.
get right in there. Just.
There's a schematic.
Keep it simple, Scott.
Yeah. There's schematic design, design development, and construction documents. Those are the 3 primary design phases. Sorry, you made me laugh. Those are where each design phase will build upon the next one. We'll start off simple. And we're just going to begin kind of pushing and pulling some shapes. And you'll see that here in just a moment. And then once we get to the end of schematic design, then we make a presentation to the commissioners. We update, the schedule, the project scope, and the anticipated construction cost. And with approval, then we go into design development, and it will build upon the schematic design phase and so on until we get through the end of construction documents. But the point I want to make is during each one of those design phases, there are very, very detailed meetings with the user groups. I mean, it could be anything from we'll be walking through, the plans and talking about what types of detention door hardware, and we'll be looking at different sites and views and those types of things. It's very detailed. And then bidding and award, we would anticipate 1.5 months, and then construction administration, and then transition and occupancy. Now, the one thing that we want, it's covered up here by the text, but it says policies and procedures. What we mean by that is from the very offset from a project, we need to be thinking about the sheriff's office and jail policy and procedure. Now, the one thing I want to challenge, and I'm looking back there to the back as well, is we will be challenging you, and we want you to challenge us, because we don't want you to be thinking this is the way I've always done it, because this is the way that the only way I could do it over the last 25, 30 years, because the building dictated that's the way I wanted to do it. So we will be challenging you and sharing some, ideas and experiences we've implemented elsewhere. And we want you to challenge us also and say, well, why can't I, or why can't we? And we will collectively come up with design solutions. So that's the one thing that I really want to stress is don't let your past experiences or the way that you currently operate your facility where you've kind of been hamstrung. This is our opportunity to get it right. So that's where we want to really stress.
And
Yes.
also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We're all having mic issues today. So as we are talking about this project approach, I wrote this, I feel like this, hopefully this is an okay time for me to ask this question because I wrote this down as we were going through the beginning. As we talk about approach and kickoffs and all of the build, to me, it would make sense for us as a committee to have a knowledge of how much, how big, how small, like those things. So I guess for my question to you as the developer and the builder is, doesn't it make sense for us as a county to already have that information ready for you
So I want to answer a couple of your
Okay.
questions or comments. Yes, is the short answer. At the offset of the design, we need to know how many beds. Real close, because that will dictate our housing and our classification recommendations and suggestions. The one thing that a comment that you made, and I know that it's been said in these CJRC meetings, that I just want to make abundantly clear. We're not developers, we're not builders. We're the architects and engineers. We design based on the bed count and the budget that the commissioners and the council dictate. So I just want to make sure that people understand that we design it, but we don't submit a bid to actually build it.
So a couple of things that I want also to expand on is, yes, bed numbers makes a big difference, but also from the sheriff and his staff, it's also the philosophy and the policy of how they want to operate the facility. And that is a big driver in what your facility is. You just can't take another facility from some other county and put that same facility here and say, Sheriff, there you go make it work. Because every time you design something, there can be differences. And I think that that is something that's very key, is that a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on how different components of the building should be designed. And I think that that's where groups like this is where those opportunities to share those things. But then when we go back and we meet with the sheriff and we meet with the staff and get into some of the hardcore items of those details, is that we're also aligning it with how they're going to eventually operate this in a few years out. That is critical in the design.
Yes.
Yes, sir. That actually, I have a question on that. So you were just saying that the policy itself is a big driver of how that facility is going to be built, right? And you've mentioned the sheriff's department, and I also heard the jail. What I didn't hear is the courts. And
Sure.
So currently we are all a connected facility, and there are a lot of policies in play in terms of how the courts are interacting with the jail to transport people to make sure they're able to be there in court. So I guess that leads me to a couple questions. One, what is it your understanding presently of the facility that you're building? Is it solely a jail, or does this include an entire justice campus? And two, what is your present understanding of the locality of where that could be? And where do you see the courts and public defenders and prosecutor's office as a part of those policies?
Okay, so my understanding is those decisions have not been made yet. I understand, though, that there are budget constraints for whatever the decision is. We, as a taxpayer, I don't usually get to say we, but we, since I live here, we don't have the luxury of being able to build everything that we may want to build right this minute. So whatever the long-term goal and objective is, what that decision is, whether it's a campus, a co-located campus, or whether or not it's downtown, or whatever the case might be, those decisions will come later. And, whatever that decision is, we need to master plan for it now. So if the decision is, outside of city limits, co-located, not co-located, we need to plan for it now as part of the master planning process, part of the site evaluation. I think you asked something about site. What was your question about the site?
The second one was, where is your current understanding of where the location of this new facility would be?
Yeah, so we don't know yet. It's my understanding that the commissioners and Jeff Cockrell, I think they're kind of mulling over some potential sites. And I think they're going to kind of forward those potential sites to us to kind of do an initial evaluation of which ones we think might, float to the top, float to the bottom, whatever. And then kind of focus on some of those sites that might be more appropriate.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some potential sites and you're going to work through that. And then my last question, I guess probably it's a broader question. How do you envision this committee and the community being able to be a part of those? I noticed
So that's like on the next slide coming up.
Perfect. I would love to.
Okay.
And
So-
before we get there, just a quick reminder, there is a fan blowing back here that is making it very hard for those to hear. So please speak up.
All right.
All right.
Sorry.
All right, so this is a graphic that I mentioned just a moment ago when I talked about the three primary design elements and about each one building upon the next. So the image on the left is schematic design. It's still pretty loose. We're, kind of hand drawing, hand sketching based on the building program that we collectively develop. Should the core services of the facility, that being the kitchen, the laundry, the intake booking, vehicle sally port, should those be located here? And where should those be in relationship to the sheriff and jail administration? And where should those are the decisions that we're kind of pushing and pulling things around on the paper. Just kind of get the big orientation set correctly based on policy and procedure, right? And then once that's developed, then we'll take it a little further. And the middle picture there is what we refer to as design development. So we're building on the detail a little bit, getting more and more detailed. We're asking more questions, making some decisions and incorporating that into the design. And then what you see on the far right-hand side, that's the construction document. So by that point, at the end of construction documents, those decisions are made. Every detail, every specification is put together, and it's ready for contractors to bid it. So just wanted to kind of show a graphic there of what to expect. So this is what we referred to just a moment ago regarding stakeholders and the typical roles and participation. And what we typically see, the county commissioners, county council, sheriff and jail administration, and DLZ is the architects and engineers on the project. We are going to be working especially close all the way through the project. Now, the judges, the prosecutor, public defender, probation, and I know maintenance, public, and
Service providers.
community corrections is also on there. You all are part of the justice system. And when you heard us talking about Vigo County just a moment ago, and Eric was talking about how there was a lot of input from the justice components, especially at the intake booking, and whether or not there was an opportunity to take them, defer them to another program. Those are where we are going to really need your input as far as policies and procedures, how we as a community deal with inmates that are incarcerated or not incarcerated. Where are they going? Are they going to be diverted? So we're going to really be sitting here as a group talking about a lot of those decisions up front. It's kind of a high level, but once the project begins to solidify, and it will begin to solidify because of, I think, budget constraints, we're going to be focusing on the sheriff's office and jail. That's where we're going to be having some very, very detailed questions as we kind of get into the inmate housing areas and those types of things.
Thank you. Have you been given a number for what your budgetary constraints are? It keeps coming up. So
I'm sorry, can you?
have you been given a number for your budgetary constraints? You keep mentioning it, so I just wanted to understand that a little more.
I don't know for sure. I just know in some very preliminary conversations, and I don't even remember if it was issued in the RFQ or I don't remember. For a co-located community justice project, if we're talking about a full-blown, courts, community corrections, I know that we've talked about, perhaps a standalone, not standalone mental health facility. House Bill 1006 may play a big part in that. I don't believe that the current funds will accommodate doing everything right now.
I'm sorry, did you receive a number? I think was.
I don't have a specific number. I mean, I kind of have a range just in my head of where I think we're going to be.
In terms of better understanding, you said you want to know what all the components are before you start solidifying them. You said it seems important to know then if the courts are going to be connected to the jail because we transport people from downstairs to the courtroom. Seems like that's a key component. How does that fit into your planning process?
No, I agree. Absolutely. If there's going to be a court component to this project, is a decision that we still have to make. Because there very well may be, just like Stark County, for example, where there was a civil court aspect as part of that project.
And it's the same thing that we did at Jefferson County, is that there was an area that we did master planning, did programming such that if they wanted to add the courts in the future, there's an area that is designed for them to be able to add that at that point in time. That may include courts, it may include the clerk, maybe probation, prosecutor, it may be all of them, but there's space on the property for them to be able to do that. So that's part of the master planning that I'm sure Monroe County will want to be doing.
I was going to ask about that because based on your experience, I'm curious. I'm assuming it's so much more financially responsible to kind of plan big and for a lot of the contingencies that might come up, such as the number of beds or the co-location. In other words, would it be financially more responsible just to only focus on the jail now? And then with the thought that we're going to need to co-locate the courts later, right? You want to have a bigger plan.
Yes.
So, and I just asked that because I think Ms. Wilson posed some decent questions that various people on the committee kind of rolled their eyes at. And I think it's important that we consider all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so with your experience, you'll be able to help guide us too
Absolutely.
and say, oh, wait, you guys build what you want, but here, based on our experience, that might be a mistake, correct?
Yes.
Because
Yes,
like you said, there'll be some push and pull. Think about this.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be challenging you and we want you to ask questions of us, and we need to know long-term what the overall goals and objectives are for Monroe County. I don't want us, and I say us because I live here, but I don't want us to be short-sighted. I want us to do the right thing with the clear understanding that it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to afford to do all of it now. But maybe we can add another component in 5 years. Maybe we can add another component in 10 years. Let's think about it and be wise and smart about it.
But one last question. So you referenced a lot of change in thinking in terms of how you plan facilities such as this. With that shift in thinking, have you noticed more of a tendency to do the co-location, or are you still seeing separate buildings and transferring, say, the inmates to and from the court? Or do you see more of a co-location trend? And if you can't answer, that's fine. I'm just curious based on what you've noticed in the shift of design.
So I will say that the majority of the projects that we work on throughout the Midwest, co-location is not usually a big driver because of cost, initial cost. And when they weigh the transportation costs, it's usually something that's kind of punted down the road. But I can tell you that probably over the last 10 to 12 years, some of the projects that we've worked on, several of them have intentionally bought more ground than what they obviously need for the sheriff's office and jail. Because in the back of their head, they're thinking, well, someday we want to have the opportunity for expansion or to add a court or to add whatever.
I think you kind of answered it. I was just wondering, well, you probably don't know, but weighing the cost of transportation for 10 years or something. I'm assuming you don't have.
So one of the things that we do at the end of every phase is we want to help the council determine operation costs for the facility. You know, it's one thing to go build the new facility, but how are you going to maintain it? How are you going to operate it? How are you going to staff it? What are all those costs are, including transportation, including holding at another facility. Those are all costs that we absolutely look at it in each and every phase of a design. You know, I say it all the time. The absolute worst conversation for a sheriff to have is the day he opens the door and he walks to the council and goes, "Hey, I need to hire 12 guys or 12 people." And the council goes, "You never said anything about this." So that's one of the things we just try to make it where there's no surprises or to limit the surprises as we go along. And that's where the transportation cost, you know, I think that if anyone followed it, the new Indy Marion County CJC project, one of the big drivers to that project was to reduce the I believe the number is $4 million a year that they were using to just transport inmates. And that was a big driver of how they went out and built their new facility.
Yeah, I just want to note that we've had this kind of, elephant in the room of, oh, we got to deal with a budget, and we don't know what the budget is yet. And I mean, it's a great question because we need to know it. That's up to the council. And what we have right now, just to bring everybody up to speed, is we have a general plan to use the edit tax as a way to fund a bond to pay for a facility. Now, when the city council passed the edit tax, they never once consulted us about the rate, nor did they write it in such a way that it would be beneficial for the county. So we're limited with what that edit tax will provide. And that's unfortunate. It's just a fact of life. There are other mechanisms. And that's why I kept turning to the council, like, you guys want to jump in? To see what anybody else wanted to add to that, because it's a huge question in terms of planning. It is, what is your budget? And one of the things I really appreciate is this approach to thinking about the entire space holistically, because that impacts staffing, and that impacts the strain of staffing in numbers of staff members, but also in terms of their stress level performing the job. And so the whole budget is going to have to be considered, not just building the building, as they mentioned. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for DLZ? Yeah, please.
So, yeah, council has a lot to consider in the coming months. My question would be, I kind of want to go back to this point that you made. And if I heard you correctly, please, and I wrote it down. So if I didn't get it correct, please correct me. But there's a comment that you made about how you all build jails will reduce recidivism. And I'm trying to go back to that because I'm not sure if I saw anything in the presentation that goes to that point. Can you, do you have something that shows that that's what you can help and do? Or I just want to make sure I heard that correct.
So are you talking about like hard facts, figures, something like that?
Yeah, there was a point in your slide that had said something about, and maybe I'm the only person that caught that. There's a part that's you had mentioned in the presentation that says what you build can help reduce recidivism. Am I getting that wrong?
Okay, so if I could.
Okay, I want to make sure, because I'm looking around the road, I'm looking at faces like, oh crap, sorry.
Okay, so let me try to address that. What we have been told from facilities that we've designed, where we've implemented either all or some components of the things we talked about here this evening, that have been occupied from the correctional officers, they talk about behavioral management, how much better behaved the inmates are. And that's also kind of tied back to staff and inmate safety. We like to think of it as the big proponent of that is the normalized environment. Because I've always said, he's heard me say it before, if we build 6-sided concrete boxes and we treat them like animals, are we really surprised at how they may act? And that's what we have to get away from. We have to provide a more normalized environment where they behave better, where they're being treated like humans, and they therefore act better, more safely, more humane, and it's just a whole better relationship. So I just want to state that. As far as a hard fact or figure regarding reducing recidivism, I don't know that I can actually, I'm sure I could get some of that information. I don't know it off the top of my head as far as how, that would reduce the potential recidivism rate. I can also say that a direct supervision housing supervision style. Again, I don't have the hard facts and figures, but I've heard from the correctional officers that are actually logging, the intakes and the bookings, that the direct supervision style also reduces the recidivism rate because they have that hands-on relationship. There's camaraderie between the jail staff and inmate.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry.
So the direct supervision, I'm assuming you would need increased numbers of staff. Is that correct?
So typically, yes. And that's part of the decision of the number crunching, because with increased staff but reduced recidivism rate, that's part of the trade-off. Is, are we achieving better results in slowing down the recidivism rate? And how is that cost compared to adding additional staff?
But we don't know that that reduces recidivism.
I can't tell you the hard facts and figures, but I could dig and find some.
So with having more staff, because we're all talking about having more programs, you're going to have more staff. But what pops in my mind constantly is that actually the mentally ill right now, we are struggling. I mean people that really, really, that you look at, they have a mental illness. We're not equipped for that. We're going to need some resources either next to the jail or outside of the jail, but that's one thing we need to start thinking about. Because right now I could tell you I have 2 individuals that should not be in there right now. So long-term, we need to start thinking about that. But as far as, and I get it, as far as the way the court and the jail works right now, I prefer having you right next to me. I really do, because it's easier for us. But it sounds like we might have to do transportation as well. So like I'm on board. Somehow we have to work that out. So.
Councilmember Wiltz.
Yeah. To that point, I've been trying to figure out how to ask about this, but we've been thinking, or at least we were thinking along that sequential intercept model and the recommendations that came in Eve Hill's report. And I know you're architects and engineers. But you brought up the stakeholder and participation in the policies and those types of things that are kind of the driving force behind what you're going to be coming up with. And I'm wondering, have you looked at the recommendations that we got from Eve Hill on what to do outside of the jail, and how will you manage your project to support us in our efforts to kind of make it not an isolated entity, but something that we're supporting in the community?
Yeah. That's a big question. That's a huge question. I have read both reports, the Kenneth Ray and the Eve Hill. They're printed, they're on my desk. The Eve Hill report, when we talk about holistically, we're talking more about, the building and how it can accommodate and reflect the goals and objectives of the jail and the sheriff's office itself. The Eve Hill report, when I say holistically, I'm talking about a whole nother level of holistically, because it's the entire justice system that she's really addressing. There are some recommendations in there that some of them are hard to refute, and some of them are going to be some tough choices of how to address it here in the community. But I think to answer your question is absolutely, when we are meeting as a group and we're talking holistically about the justice system as it pertains to the sheriff's office and jail, there are certainly components, I'm sure, out of the Eve Hill report that somebody's going to bring forth and we're going to say, you're right. And because of that, what if we did this? And we'll brainstorm together. And we'll bounce ideas off of each other. But I just want to say that that's a whole nother level of a holistic approach.
All right, I'm going to swing over to online. We have Commissioner Githens with their hand raised. Oh, okay. She's lowering her hand, or she's wanting to talk.
Yes,
Commissioner-
thank you. I hit the wrong button. I was trying to get off of mute. When you talk about this direct supervision model, which requires more staffing, is there data out there that indicates that this kind of approach, more humane approach, reduces staff turnover?
So Commissioner, if I heard you correctly, is there any data that a direct supervision reduces staff turnover? Was that your question?
Yes, because that also impacts the costs of staffing.
It does. I can't answer that, but I'm sure that we can dig and make some phone calls and find some data one way or the other.
Thank you.
Before we go back for any questions, do you have more slides to present?
I think it was just a thank you. Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for DLZ here at the table from committee members? Yes.
Well, I don't know if this is for DOZ or what, maybe as a whole. Is this a presentation that we can have on the CJRC's website?
Yes, ma'am. We already have it in the council office. It'll be on the CJRC website, I don't know, tomorrow, the day after, this week.
Tomorrow
So
morning,
do you-
definitely.
Do you have the PDF of it?
Ms. Mosier.
Yeah, please use the PDF. There was a font difference and that's why some of the wording was a little wonky in the presentation. So for what we had, so please use the PDF.
Ms. Wilson.
I just have one last question. There was, and maybe it's best directed to the commissioners. There was reference to some potential sites that might be sent to DLZ for consideration. I was wondering if we could know a little bit more about what those sites were that the commissioners are considering.
We're not going to announce potential sites at this time. I will just say that we have more than a dozen mapped out for preliminary. We haven't even begun the preliminary review yet, and we're going to work with council on that. So. But we will let folks know as soon as we can.
Judge Carly.
Yeah, I just had a question about Vigo County. I think you said it was a 500 bed.
504.
Okay, and they're a smaller community, I think, than Monroe County. Do you know how you came up with that number of beds?
Yeah, we did we analyzed a lot of different criteria with that. And like I also said, Dr. Kenneth Ray also did a very similar study. We had one bed difference in two, and he never saw our study before he did his own. One of the things we look at is we always look at the admissions. We look at the releases. We look at the average daily population. And from that, we're able to generate what average length of stay are in facilities. We also looked at that they had a self-imposed cap on their existing facility versus how many inmates they were sending out of county on a very regular basis. And we came up with the number of 504 beds. I will note that with many counties, if they had unlimited financial opportunities, they probably would have built a bigger facility. Just because of what their long-term, 30-year span is out. So what they did was they accomplished a number that was acceptable from the commissioners to the council to the community. And that's where the 504 beds. Right now, they've been in the facility for about a year. I was there last Thursday and Friday doing our 10-month, 11-month walkthrough for the warranty purposes. And they were right around, if I remember right, 360, 370 is where they were at.
Yes.
And can I ask one other question
of course,
about Vigo County? I think you said there are 4 video arraignment
Yes.
courts. Are they using those? Because
Are they using those?
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
okay, so they're doing initial hearings that way?
Yes, they are. That's what I was told. I mean, that,
Okay.
you know, we have the spaces, and last Thursday, I was asking the jail commander how often they're used, and he says they are used all the time. That's what he told me.
Ms. Wilson, please.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up then, because I understood your answers, commissioners. It sounds like you have 12 possible sites at this moment around, and that you're going to work with county council to pick that site.
We have more
And-
than a dozen potentials, which, yeah. I don't know the exact number right off the top of my head.
Okay, so you have more than a dozen potential sites, and if I heard it correctly, you're going to work with county council to pick one of those sites. I hear it as in, it's not going to be something further discussed at CJRC, but I was wondering, is that conversation about those sites, is that going to be at a public meeting? And if so, could we get notice in case those of us at the committee or those of us within the community who'd like to attend those meetings, we can be better informed?
We can address this later, but we've been advised by our attorney that the process of selecting, and we're also going to rely on DLZ to assist. It's not just us doing it. We're going to use their insight to help move to the point where we have a smaller group of sites. But according to Mr. Cockrell's advice, is that you don't engage in a discussion of potential sites to purchase vis-a-vis real estate in a public setting. We've never done it before. And if you think about it, there's a good reason to not do that. But at every juncture possible, we intend to be very public and transparent about where things are at in the process. That's all I can really say right now.
Did you have a follow-up, or can kick it over
you're
to Councilmember Crossley?
I would say, as, and I know it's 6:02 here, so, because we have invoked the name of the county council here several times in the meeting, I know I'm just one of 7, but I know that personally, if we are to work collaboratively and transparently, as our guiding principles are saying, with the commissioners, that it would be my hope as one of 7 and also one of 3 on this committee, that we also include the committee body members of this particular committee in the process. I understand for legality reasons to, and I'm not disputing what you're saying with that, but I have questions about that because, yeah. So again, all I'm saying is I would just really hope that we can all have that conversation instead of it just being brought to the attention of once things are settled, then everybody knows. Because then we get back into the square root of how things have happened in the beginning with the committee. That would just be my hope as a county council member.
We need to have that discussion together. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We have DLZ at the table. Are there any other questions for the group? It seems to me that this is a pretty momentous meeting where we have a design firm at the table. And I want to make sure that all voices are heard. So with the fact that we do have city representatives in the audience, I wanted to give a moment to see if there's any questions from our colleagues in the city. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Counselor Iverson. I would ask, with the public outreach and community outreach portion, the DLZ folks are leaving. Oh,
yeah.
okay. Ms. Wilson kindly let me use hers. Is DLZ going to be the entity that engages the public and other members of the community, or will that be done through county government? And I would put in a particular plug to consult with our police department as they bring people to the facility frequently. Most people that go there come. So who will do public outreach?
Is that the
and will it
practice of
include us?
DLZ to kind of like take over the running of these public meetings, or how does it? Yeah.
So it's not uncommon for DLZ to lead and give presentation updates, to the public at the commissioner's discretion at various stages throughout the design. If there's a momentous decision or design element, that's been made or we're in the process of, the DLZ at the commissioner's discretion can and are very willing to lead those public presentations.
Excellent.
The police, will they be involved?
The question was, and the police, will they be involved? And the answer from the commissioners is yes. Ms. Goodman.
Yeah, do you think that we can judge the size of the jail that's needed before we've studied the impact of prevention work and know our budget?
I can't hear you. I'm
Do
sorry.
you think that we can judge the size of the jail that's needed before we've studied the impact of prevention work and know our budget?
Size of the jail regarding the number of beds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know that there's been 2 previous studies completed, and I presume that they would do like we would do, and that's analyze what we call JMS, jail management software data, to determine a recommendation. But if I'm understanding you correctly, based on the programming and the implementation thereof, whether or not that might reduce the recidivism rate, are you asking then if that might also then affect the number of beds? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, kind of related to that. Like what does DLZ have best practices on reducing recidivism and incarceration numbers? And then kind of related to that, is there a budget for that, either as part of DLZ's project or elsewhere from the county? Because in my mind, that would help.
And I
decide.
understand what your questions are. Realize this is the design right now. It's a blank sheet of paper. And working together, that's where the philosophies, the procedures on how you want to approach this, the types of spaces that you want to engage into the actual design. Once those things start happening, then yes, we can start giving you answers. But to say, what's the score of the game tomorrow? It's only estimated guesses. We don't know because we haven't had those initial meetings to really start talking about the programming policies and procedures. And that is all very, I don't want to be coy with the answer, but it's the reality of it is we need to do our research based on the approaches that you want to accomplish with your facility. And then we will absolutely give you the information that you need.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess it feels like if we're moving forward with design elements and we haven't studied the impact, the anticipated impact of decarceration and reducing recidivism efforts, then it seems like it would be challenging to know how many beds we would need. And I think maybe it's less of a question for you guys, maybe more for the county council about sort of like the budget and plans for those decarceration efforts, because it just feels like kind of a cart horse situation, right? I understand that you have to study it in order to come up with a number of beds, but if we're already moving forward with design,
So
it feels like we
to
might
be honest,
behind.
that was a very strong element in the whole Franklin County design is that Michael Daniels was doing, get the term that he used, was looking at how they can incarcerate folks differently by going through all these programs. And Michael Daniels was actually a county employee that was working on this policy. And the whole point of it is that we can talk about opportunities to reduce beds, but there's also got to be the commitment of the county, of the service providers to provide these services that we're talking about in the facilities. You know, we can talk about all the societal, as I said, the societal beds in the facility, but you've got to have staff, you've got to have the care providers in those spaces working. Otherwise, it's not going to work if you're not committed holistically to making the change. And the same thing goes with the whole transition back into the community, is that the community also has to help with what that transition back to the community is. We can build the best facility possible for the right amount of money, but as a community as a whole has also have to buy into that program for it to work.
Absolutely. And I'll just, my one last thing is, I think we're saying the same thing, which is
Sure.
just that it requires not just building a facility, but having these other services. So I think I just want to reiterate that as we move forward with design, there's a lot of other things we need to be considering. Thank you.
I agree with you. Thank you.
So that brings up something that you brought up earlier, Mr. Carnegie, which is House Bill 1006, which if I think everything goes as planned up in Indianapolis, the authors, they want to build 5 facilities throughout the state. Can DLZ design those facilities?
Yes. And also keep track of Senate Bill, I think it's Senate Bill 1.
That's right.
Which is the companion bill to House Bill 1006.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep,
Right.
yep. All right, gentlemen.
Can you explain what those bills are for the public?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Renbeck. 1006 is the bill that's looking at, House Bill 1006 is looking at the facilities, the standalone mental health facilities. So that's a really big question as to whether or not those will be funded, because you talked about, doing this in phases, or, how we're not gonna be able to build everything we want in one fell swoop. So if there is space for a mental health facility, and we hear from our sheriff that we have at least 2 people that don't belong there right now, it's nice to know that if the resources are there, that you all have the capability to design it and bid out for its construction.
Yes.
All right, any more questions? Seeing none, gentlemen, thank you so much. Oh,
Not for DLZ. No.
all right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Your slides will be on the CJRC website this week. So folks want to dive deeper or see those slides with the correct font, you'll be able to do so. All right. I do get picky about fonts. We're going to move on to committee comments. And I think I'm going to start here on my left with our commissioner.
I prefer to go last, please.
Oh, all right. So this is a time, but if you have anything that you want to say, we do this in the county council. At the very end, it's an opportunity for you to say something that maybe you didn't have an opportunity to say. We want to hear from all voices. So you don't have to say anything, but it does give you an opportunity to maybe summarize or think, or, some other way of talking about what's happened tonight. Do you have any committee comments? If not, then that's all right. And we'll pass it along to Ms. Crossley.
I wanted to thank Ms. Goodman and the city for working so hard to get both county and city representatives together to look at a property later this week. This is the Thompson property. It's one we already own. And I don't think I'm the only person who is excited about its potential. Hopefully we'll have an update on that and can share more information afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Crossley.
Yes. So I know I didn't want to put DLZ representatives on the spot with the whole thing about reducing recidivism. But I just wanted, since that was in the slide, I just wanted to clarify, that was my reason for asking. And I just want to comment that, of course, it's just me. I believe, of course, what we build does not reduce recidivism, of course, but it's the makeup of what county commissioners do with county council and what we do as this larger body, and what programs and services we do before we get to the point of folks going into our jail, because obviously by the time they get there, we have failed and it is too late. So that's just one thing. Secondly, in addition to this presentation being online, I was hoping, I know back in March, when the commissioners went and took their tour to Maricopa County and other counties, that we would see that presentation on the CJRC website. And I know being on Zoom, and I've heard from other constituents that they would like to see that. So I don't know if that is something that could be on our website in the near future, because I would love to go back and revisit that as well.
I believe, Ms. Mosier, we have not received written report for Arizona yet.
No, we have not.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that would be perfect. And then the last comment that I'll just make quickly is I do appreciate the fact that we have some of our city colleagues here. We have members of the public that are here. I've said this before and I'll say it again. From the beginning, I have pushed for public comment and I continue to do so. I'm very thankful for public comment because the way that we all have been going about in these meetings, their comments have also influenced the way that I think. And the handouts that I get, they don't go in a wastebasket somewhere or recycling. They go into my binder at home and I ponder on these and I have conversations. So I just appreciate public taking their time to educate us. But on that subject of public comment, folks are saying that they would love to see organizations come to us. And I've also echoed that before, and I would love to see maybe in the near future for other future meetings as we talk about developing and things like that, that we would hope to see these groups and organizations come to us as well.
Thank you, Ms. Rembeck.
I just want, in terms of the Public Defender's Office perspective on this, I do want to specifically thank Commander Gibbons for meeting with us. He met with our office and we discussed some of the issues that we were currently having with the jail. We look forward to meeting with him again to talk about some of the, I just want to echo some of the things that other people have brought up, which is that we believe in our office that there are things that could be implemented now. Positions that could be added now, things we could be doing now. Because as we all know, a new jail is not coming anytime soon. So we appreciate that Commander Gibbons was willing to talk with us and he was really helpful in terms of fixing some of the struggles we were having. And we look forward to obviously continuing those conversations with him and obviously Sheriff Marte. So thanks. All right.
Judge Fawcett.
I think I said at the very first meeting since I started on this group that we still need more guidance. I mean, I have been within the criminal justice system for almost 20 years. And I have experiences and input that I'm more than willing to share. And just because I say these are my experiences and this is what I think doesn't mean you all have to follow what I happen to say. But the timeline that DLC put up there about the progression of how, you know, a committee could work towards redoing a jail actually made me kind of sad because I just feel like we're just stuck because we're not getting input from the commissioners about what their vision is or with the county council and how you could do a budget. And all of those things are so outside of my league. But somebody needs to tell us again, I've said it from the get-go, what you envision this new community justice center to be. And we're consistently coming back with the same question. What's the budget? We don't know. How many beds? We don't know. Where are we doing it? We don't know. And I understand there's different rationales for maybe not including the group in all of the processes, but I can't give input on what I think we need based on my experience until we get a firmer guideline as to what this is supposed to look like. And it is the cart before the horse or the chicken or the egg. We're stuck in that debate. What comes first? Somebody just needs to start because again, the people sitting upstairs in jail, they're stuck there and we're not doing them any good by having the same conversations time and time and time and time again.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
I just want to first express my appreciation for the conversation that we're having today. I appreciate the whole course of it. So I just want to express my appreciation to the committee and to specifically Councilmember Iverson. I also wanted to join Councilmember Crossley mentioning, and this came up in public comment about, and it's come up again, things that we can do now. On the topic of bringing someone in to present to us, New Leaf, New Life, is my understanding they had emailed and shared that they have a program that they're doing in the jail to help people transition from release. I'm sorry, is that better? Commissioner Thomas, thank you. And since I think it would be really helpful to invite New Leaf, New Life to tell us about that program. And then I would love to know from the sheriff as well to understand if there are any gaps or needs that he has or ideas for that release process. And I think it'd be a great way to utilize all the different voices at this table and even the community to figure out what our gaps are and what we can do better during that initial 72 hours of release to support people. So that's just a suggestion. I would ask that we put it on the agenda. And I really, once again, really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Judge Carthy.
I guess what I would ask going forward is more on the transparency piece. I feel like as a committee, we always find out things after the fact. We found out that DLZ was the firm that was hired. We found out they paid $10,000, I think, per site. There was something at the only way I found out about anything is at the commissioners meeting. So I would just appreciate, we have an email with all the committee members. If we could have a little more, not necessarily input, but if we had a little more information before meetings, I would find that helpful. Also, what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong about this, is that you're planning to build a jail, and I'm assuming leaving us at the Justice Building. I'm not sure. Maybe Commissioner Thomas could answer that.
We don't have an answer yet.
Okay. My concern with that is we have a facility that's been neglected for a number of years. There's hesitancy to bring it back to the standard it should be. So I have concern about us staying there and our employees staying there. And I think that I understand that we don't have the money maybe right now for co-location, but if I'm remembering right, when we talked, I think it was when we did the site visit out at Fullerton Pike, we talked to Attorney Cockrell, and he said that there may be ways to get other bonds to do the whole system at once. So that's my concern, is that I believe co-location would be more cost efficient in the long run, because if you leave the one facility open, you have a new facility, then you're paying operating budget on two facilities. We also need at the Justice Building, we need security. And then if you have a courtroom at the other place, you're going to need security as well. So those are my main concerns.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sheriff Marte.
I'd like to echo everything that everyone said here. One of the things that we're trying to do is move fast enough and provide what we could do right now. The issue is that we're still in the process of trying to clean up and sanitize that jail. It slows us down tremendously. So bear with us if you see a little bit of hesitation that, we want to do it right now and we just can't. I know a lot of people are frustrated with the way things used to be. We're trying to move as fast as we can. We really are.
Commander Gibbons.
I can tell you with certainty.
Can you?
It says it's on.
Oh,
it's in my face.
Like a press conference.
Does that work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We actually have implemented multiple programs. New Leaf, New Life has come in. We're still getting acclimated with how they want to move. We're still providing them different spaces, additional room to operate more. So initially, when we came in, maximum security inmates were not allowed to participate in these programs. It's since been lifted. The number of inmates that can take part in each program has been lifted. We try to dedicate more officers to those areas. We have a camera that remains on at all times. So although we are doing a lot at once, we have put a lot into making sure our programs are being successful. We just started a science biology class based on what inmates were kind of asking for. I met with the public defenders, like she said. I've tried to talk to the judges as much as possible whenever we cross paths. I spoke to the gentleman that spoke in the beginning. Anything that we can do, we've looked into. No information is bad information, and we're trying to do that very quickly.
So I wanted that to come from the jail commander himself, because he's doing a good job with this. But at the same time, I want everyone to understand that this is a lot of undertaking in the 4 months period that we've been here. We could do more. However, it's going to come a point where we just don't have the space to do what we want to do. So I just want the public to understand that, but understand what we can do, we will do. And if we can help each other out, we need your assistance with other programs that is not in the jail to help us have individuals not come back into the system.
Thank you, sir.
That's great.
Commissioner Thomas.
No, I just want to thank Commander Gibbons for the update and the hard work. I think it's really great, and we do all appreciate it on the Board of Commissioners. And thank DLZ for being here today because they gave us a lot of great information, and appreciate that they've been attending these meetings and commissioner meetings and council meetings throughout this time period and becoming acclimated to how we function. But I just want to just put a marker out that just as a reminder, and I'm sorry, I've been on my phone. I'm trying to let people know why I'm late for my next meeting because I'm now a half hour late. But I just want to put a marker out that the committee here is supposed to be working on intercept 0 through 6, not building a jail specifically. Building a jail is part of that, but we do have a lot more of a mandate than a jail. That's been our focus lately. And I just want to set that out there, especially for the public who wants to know why something's not happening here. And it's, yeah. So, but I am going to ask my colleagues now. Commissioner Jones has left because she had a meeting she had to get to. But I'm going to ask Commissioner Githens if she would agree to this, but I would like to recommend that to my colleagues on the Board of Commissioners that we have a discussion at our work session on Wednesday, which is April 19th, regarding the next CGRC meeting and the many tasks that we have to address for community justice reform, intercept 0 through 6.
Thank you so much.
That works for me.
Thank you.
Commissioner Githens, did you want to make a statement or how you feeling, I guess?
Not great, but that's why I've had my video off the whole time. But no, I really do appreciate what the sheriff and what Commander Gibbons are doing in the jail. I know they're working hard, and these are exactly the kinds of programs that we want to see long-term.
Thank you. Let me offer my statement that I think it's very important that we remain curious. I think it's very important that we sit in discomfort. I think none of this is comfortable or easy, and that it is very important for us to not rush understanding or hearing from others that may differ from us in our perspective. Particularly, I am really happy to hear in this go around people offering differing opinions than what was presented in DLZ. I'm also very happy that DLZ was here to present today, and I do think that this is a step forward. I think we're moving in the right direction here. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think we're there yet. But I wanted to share that we do need to remain curious. We do need to remain patient, and we do need to sit in discomfort throughout this process. With that, we are adjourned. We will see you all next time, which will happen on Monday, May the 1st at 4:30 p.m. in this very room or online at your pleasure. Thank you all.